Hello and welcome to another Thursday Nature Mystic discussion. Melissa's traveling doing some store business. So today you have me and Zane, and we're going to be talking today about the Katari tradition, specifically about what lineages comprise of that. But we'll give them a minute or two for people to recognize that we're on. And Zane, how have you been doing? It's only been like a week or two since I last got to
I
do this with
know
you.
it's been crazy.
I know it's kind of fun. I hope we can make a habit out of it.
We
It's really
might be
nice.
able to.
Yeah. So when we talked about a topic the other day, one thing that I always our history and our lineage with this tradition is so rich, and I hear Zane sometimes say, we stand on the bones of our ancestors, and this tradition goes back so far, but it's a living tradition, and every little pocket does it a little differently. And what this really is a blending of some of these traditions that Zane has apprenticed under in his travels in Peru, and where would you like to start with that conversation?
Well, I mean, maybe.
Ooh,
What is it?
no, I just thought, how about the name Katari?
That's where I was going to go, actually.
Oh, well, it's okay. Well, I'm sorry. I should stop reading your mind and let you.
No, just great minds think alike. We were on the same
Yeah,
wavelength there.
yeah. It's telepathy.
So the name Katari comes from the Lake Titicaca region. And it is an understanding of a couple different things. It's the understanding of a process of personal development, but it's much more than just that. It's the way someone becomes a shining one, a way someone becomes enlightened, not enlightened like the Buddha, though he also had a light that kind of shone around him. We're talking about enlightened as in our bioluminescence, because that is a big part of this tradition. And it has to do with leadership. It really has to do with the return of Inkari, which is one of the names of the first Inca. His other official name is Manco Capac, but a lot of people call him Inkari, especially in the Queros region. Though the Queros region and the Lake Titicaca region are not that close together. But in the Lake Titicaca region, there is this understanding of the serpentine energies of the universe. And how the serpentine energies of the universe actually point us to our divine origins. And that by reestablishing ourselves back through our lineage, not the spiritual lineage, but back through our human lineage to the first people of the earth, we are creating a type of serpent, a type of serpentine energy of ancestry back. And as we clear the connections to that in our ancestry and in our spiritual lineage as well, as we clear those connections back, we connect deeper and deeper with the original mystery from which we all came, which we see in our tradition as a serpentine-like energy that went around creating the universe in its image, which was in the image of the serpent. And we can see this in everything. We see it in our modern day lives. You can see it as strings of code. The codes that make the computer work are all strings. They all start somewhere and they go somewhere. We can see this in the advent of writing. Writing systems are all done in strings. It's either left to right, right to left, up and down. Doesn't matter how the symbols are shown, they are always in strings of information, which is serpentine in nature. So we believe that there is basically these two archetypes, and it is the serpent and the egg, and they work together to manifest all of creation. We even see it in the sun and the rays of the sun being like serpentine rays or serpentine movements of energy. They could also be seen as semen. They come into the ovum of the earth that produced all biological life. That biological life is a mixture of this egg and this serpent. And the egg is like a point. And if we get into dimensionalities, and by dimensionalities, I'm not talking about the metaphysical idea of dimensions. That's totally different. I'm talking about the mathematical idea of dimensions, the physics of dimensions. And I just want to go a little more on explaining that before I say this. In in mathematics, dimensionality is something totally different than in metaphysics, the idea of the dimensions or the domains of reality. So if we go back just into the idea of mathematical dimensions or physics, we see that there is the non-dimensional point that everything originates from. First, there is the non-dimensional point, then is the dimensional point. And then when time enters to the dimensional point, the point becomes a line. The line stretched out through infinity becomes a spiral because space-time is curved. So in that idea, we have the non-dimensional point, which is the point of potential, the dimensional point, which is the egg. And then once things started moving, once that became the first mover, the egg became a string of light, which is the serpent. And that's what we're looking for in our tradition, is a direct path back to the serpent, to the point, and then to the darkness, because the reality is, a lot of times we say, oh, it's all light, it's all light. No, light was the first created. So if light is the first created thing, there was the creator before there was light, meaning that the creator created in the darkness, meaning that the creator was the darkness. So, that's another concept that we sometimes don't always latch on to. We think that light is the creator, where light is a emanation of creation, not the created, not the genesis of the creation. So, those are all concepts that we are looking for the answer to, but we look for it in an introspective way within ourselves. And the Katari comes from the Amara people of the Lake Titicaca region. And so in their tradition, when you raise up to the point where you can be a leader, where you can be a good leader, and that means that you've mastered to some degree your spiritual energy. It means you've mastered your intentionality. It means that you have brought together coherence between the way you think, the way you feel, and the way you behave. And by doing that, you are able to absorb the living energies of the universe, and you are able to project and drive the living energies of the universe. So the Katarismo is really learning how to do that. How do I fall into relationship with these living energies in a way where I don't reject any, and I allow all to come to me, and I allow all to flow from me? Because sometimes we play favorites, just like the whole light and dark conversation. Sometimes people think, oh, the dark's evil. Well, in our tradition, there's no evil, because anything that is part of life, and because it's part of life, it must be good, in a sense. Or we should just get rid of the word good as well and just say it must be. It couldn't be any other way. If it is, it is. So that is kind of where the Katari comes from. It has a equivalent in Quechua, because that's not a Quechua word, that's an Amara word. But the equivalent in Quechua is Tupac or Tumpa, which means one who has the power. So if you were an Inca of the Amara lineage, you were going to become a great Inca of the people, a great ruler, your people would see you as El Katari, the Katari. You are embodying that energy of the serpent, which, let me grab something real quick.
Okay.
So I said the energy of the serpent, and within this is a mayoral staff. And especially with the Katari tradition and with the some of the other traditions, this is a very important artifact. It's an artifact of power. And it represents that you have the power to rule, that you have the power to create abundance. It has to do with that serpentine energy. Once again, this is a serpent. This is the power of the serpent. And it's the power of a river basin or a pacarina or some type of flow of life-giving water. Because throughout the entire world, not just in the Andes, but throughout the entire world, civilizations began around places of flowing water. And one of the ways they showed that someone had the power to rule that area was through staves. It's almost a universal, or I should say a global phenomenon, that there were these things of staves of power that people held and people used. So that's so to have that staff and to hold that office shows that you are a Katari or you are an Amaru, which is another word that's sometimes used. But it has to do with our metaphysical origins. So I hope that wasn't too jumbled of a conversation. It's an interesting thing, and we eke out the knowledge of the Katari throughout all the teachings, and there's some of the knowledge that I haven't even given yet because there just hasn't been the right moment to share it with anyone, because these things happen within time, and we can only share what we can share, what we know to be important at those moments.
Yeah, otherwise it's just trivia in a way.
Yeah, really. If it doesn't mean anything, if it's just book learning, or if it's just something you're trying to pick up, that's why I always say shamanism requires, in some way, shape, or form, a living teacher. So it requires life energy. It requires some amount of interpersonal connection with a teacher of some type, because that's the only way to learn it. There's a lot of newer philosophies out there that say that, the spirits will teach you. And there's a little bit of truth to that, but there's also something called the lineage. And lineages are password protected areas of spirituality. Can you tap into some of that energy? Yes. Can you tap into all of it? No, not unless you receive the right passwords, which are the initiations, which are the karpais in our tradition, we call them, which is that you are being carried by a teacher. You've become a tusak. You've been put under the teacher's power, and it's through the teacher's power that you are able to manifest and you are able to learn. So, that's a very important point as well. It's underneath of a lineage that we learn. Yes, all of us, anyone could go and maybe see a video of Machu Picchu and maybe have a remembering of their sacredness. Maybe even if you believe in past lives, which I do and don't, but if you believe in past lives, perhaps you believe that you were there at one time and you start to pick up the information of being there. That's all beautiful and fine, but there are still password protective areas because it requires you to do certain things before the lineage is going to share certain information with you. And that's true of every spiritual tradition. It's, and that's why some knowledge gets lost and lost forever, because that particular lineage that held that information gets lost. So in my time on this tradition, I've picked up kind of where my first teacher was working at too. And one of my companions or colleagues, Alberto Vialdo, was also working. And that is that we started to notice that it wasn't just a tribal phenomenon, that there was a larger religious system of the Andes that was beyond tribal affiliations, beyond the traditions of the indigenous people. There was, in fact, an Andean, or we could call it an Incan spirituality. And the Inca were inclusive. So that spirituality was based off of all the people who were part of the group. It didn't matter that we're your tribe or your area of the empire called the metaphysical god Pachamac. And the Inca Empire itself called it Huiracocha. Didn't matter because they are both the same. They both held the same position. Didn't mean that there weren't some minor differences between them, because there was, but to the Andean way of thinking, it was to embrace the spirituality of all people. And that started with Wiracocha Inca, which was Pachacutic's Inca's father. He started this idea that the God of my neighbor is also my God. And, so they started to collect spiritual knowledge. They started to bring it in, not to transform that knowledge, not to tell the people how they should believe, but they brought it into this rich tapestry, which was the Inca Empire, which stretched basically from the very top of South America, Colombia, all the way down into Argentina. That's the entire, we know it was that entire coastline and mountain area. And many people believe the border was the Amazon River. Some of the Caro and some other people say that the border was further into Brazil than the Amazon River. So it might have been, and no one knows for sure the dimensions of it before the Spanish, but it may have been most of the continent of South America, which would make it the largest intercontinental empire of the ancient world. And and the biggest part of their growth happened within like 100-year span. And it was from this idea of your God is my God, or better said, a God of my neighbor is a friendly God to me, and I'll learn how to work with that God as well. And so that really brings us into what is the work that I picked up on, and that was that there wasn't one Inca spirituality, or better way of saying that it wasn't just about rediscovering the tribal information of one tribe, of just working with the Caro, of just working with the Kayawaya, of just working with the people who live in Ecuador. It wasn't about that. It was about trying to patch back together this tapestry of ancient Incan spirituality, and understanding that certain technologies, if you would, certain types of spiritual technologies were held by certain regions, especially the Caro region. We hear a lot about the Caro region, and that's good that we do hear a lot about them, because they're an amazing people, and I've loved my time that I've shared with them. But they aren't the only tribe. We try to say they're the most infiltrated by Western thought of any tribe, but even that's not absolutely true. That's kind of a myth of that, because even at the time that my teacher's father first discovered or went to Caros, figured out that they were a people, he found them in Cusco. He found them in the region of Cusco trading with other people, meaning that even though they lived in the remote mountains, even though they carried on the lifestyle of their ancestors, that did not mean that they didn't attend Catholic Mass. It didn't mean that they didn't have a connection with the Western metaphysics or with Western thought. They did have connection. They just chose to continue their tribal way up into that modern time. In fact, they had such a strong connection. There was something called the hacendado system, which was a system of slavery. That basically means someone who owns a hacienda, right? Someone that owns a ranch. Well, there were these ranchers that moved high up into the mountains and were really close to where the Caro's regions were, and they enslaved the Caro. They actually forced the Caro to come to their ranches and to farm for them, and they were very cruel to them. So they did have a lot of connection or connection with the Western tradition. It was just that they, like most Andean people, wanted to keep a hold of their rich heritage, because there was this idea that the Katari was returning, that the Inkari was returning, that the Umaru would return, and that the head would be reunited with the body, and that there would be a brand new Inca empire that would emerge. Not one that came out of warring, not one that came out of fighting, but a continuance of the God of my neighbor is my God as well. A continuance of that idea. So a lot of us in these traditions, we started somewhere. We started with one tribe or one knowledge, and we were trying to develop what we were called out to do, because we all were called out to work with different people. Like Izaka Bere, he works a whole lot with the Ecuadorian tradition and what would be considered the fourth level priest of that tradition. I think they're called the Yachak. And so, it was, so there are a whole lot of teachings and a whole lot of tribes, and we all got called to different areas. And we started to piece back together a mosaic. And in a sense, we are piecing back together a mosaic of ancient time. And what does that mean? So even today, there are the Karo, there are these different lineages, but maybe as you're growing, you realize that you need to receive information that isn't in your tribal family, that your teachers don't have. For some reason, you feel called, and usually you wouldn't even see it maybe as being called to a teacher. You'd feel called to a mountain. You'd feel called to an Apu, to an area that had that information for you. And if that area has that information, it means that the high priest in that area are the repositories of that information. So, it's just like now with the Karo, they live on the Peruvian side of a mountain range. And the other side, the Bolivian side of that mountain range, is another community called the Calewaya. And where the Karo hold these, the Karo have this very beautiful royal lineage, is the best way I can explain it. What they hold is certain processes of personal development and how to grow yourself with those processes of personal development. It's a type of ceremonial that's not exactly right, not ceremonial, a type of elevation that they hold within their tradition. The Kaliyawayas are very powerful healers. They were the healers of the Inca Empire. And healing is one of the aspects that called me, that all my life was healing. Spirituality and healing were two of the main guiding lights of my life. So that so I searched out not just mystical knowledge, but practical knowledge that you could use to help make changes in reality. That's why my book's called Inka Mountain Magic, is because I focus more on the magical side of the tradition than on the information side. Doesn't sound like it from talking to me, because I've had to develop that informational side of it. I've had to work at that. I've had to really work at that, because that's not natural for me. The natural thing for me is to work, to do the work itself, to do the healings, to do the magic that's going to help someone move forward in their life, not so much to do the teachings. I had to really work hard to develop that side of myself. And I'm happy that I worked so hard to develop that. But it's just a unique quality within the tradition. And I'm going to stop there, because I could ramble on and on down that avenue and maybe not get to the point of what we were intending here.
Well, I think it's really relevant to the intention. The intention for today's topic was what lineages really make up the Katari tradition, and you've given us the origins of the word Katari, and just starting to bring in that there is an underlying spirituality or cohesion amongst the tradition. And so they just have different technologies, is how I'm understanding.
Yeah, so like in the northern
place.
coastal region, what we call now the Huachumero tradition, which is the San Pedro tradition. In that area, they're healers as well, and they're ceremonialists, and they work a whole lot all three sides of the mesa, all three sides of the work they do. But they're really known for healing, and they're really known for they use that visionary cactus, so they're known for those kind of ceremonies and what that does to a person. And then in the jungles, we I apprenticed for a while a tradition that came from the jungles, which is an ayahuasca tradition, which is the tradition of Don Antonio Morales, and it's totally different. You know, even though you're saying, oh, they're both using visionary plants, well, it's totally different. Because in the jungle, though they're using the visionary plant and they have a reasoning for it, the real work is done through the spirits of the jungle. And that's what a lot of people don't always get. They think that the ayahuasca or the San Pedro is doing the work. No, in the ancient tradition, before we started in the 90s traveling there to get ayahuasca and to have these other types of ceremonies, this kind of thing was preserved for people who had truly lost their way, not just for someone who's not sure what job they want to go into, or for someone who's dealing with a little bit of sadness. No, we're talking about someone who had lost the will to live, someone who had lost the will to live, and or someone who is so terminal that they may not live. And those plant spirits of like the cactus or the ayahuasca are not responsible for the healing. They play a role in opening the client to a different meta cognition or a different way of assessing information, but they don't themselves do the healing. It is still the shaman and his reliance on his spirits that does the healing. The really gifted ayahuasqueros, they don't use ayahuasca. They don't give you ayahuasca when you come to them. They sing a song to you and they send you home happy and better. That's how it works. You know, it's not, we get this idea that you had to do the ayahuasca to become enlightened. And it's the exact opposite. If you weren't enlightened, you weren't going to do the ayahuasca. If you weren't enlightened or on death's door, well, why would you do it if you're on death's door? Because it has an ability to cause you to go into another realm of an altered state of consciousness that is not unlike the state of dying. So if you're dying, you can practice dying with it. It can teach you how to not lose yourself within the experience, the whirlwind of the experience of your sensorial senses fading and changing. It can help you to not be so afraid of those moments, much like the magic mushroom is used in end-of-life care now for people who are terminally ill, because it can remind them that there is something greater or something more than what they have experienced or what they took as being the whole of reality. And when you have an experience like that, you think, well, maybe death's not the end. Maybe there's something beyond this, you know. So those are two of the other traditions that inform the Katari tradition. So within the Paco Kuna tradition, there is the tradition of Inkari, which is the Kero tradition. The Inkari Wacho means Kero. And it means that it came from one of the communities up in the mountains above Cusco, Peru. And then there is the Huascar tradition, which is a royal lineage from Huascar Inca. And that lineage actually is in the area of Wasao, Cusco, Peru. It's a subdivision of Cusco. It comes from that area. This was a city tradition. Even before the Spanish came, remember, Cusco was the capital city of the Inca. So it was a city tradition. It was a tradition of the royal family. And we say that it holds the secrets of how you become a candidate for the coordination, how you become a candidate to become an Inca, to become one of the royals. And then there is within our tradition the Cori Lasso tradition, which comes from that Lake Titicaca region. And though it's still Paco Kuna, I mean, they all could be considered Paco Kuna in a way, but because it's still that mountain tradition, that Paco tradition, it has some other qualities, though, because of the region it's in, and those qualities come from the Amara people. It comes from the Kayawaya as well. Their information merges into this more southern tradition in Peru. And then Kayawaya is not Peruvian, it is Bolivian, you know, so that's another tradition that informs the the teachings in the Katari tradition, but by far that isn't all of them. But that is the majority of the Peruvian traditions. So when I was new to the path, first sanctioned to teach, I had this great fortune of my hometown. There was another shaman's not the word we use, that's a Tungus-Siberian word. It's just something that's become common in modern English. But, there was another medicine priest of a very high caliber in my hometown that I knew nothing about. The Reverend Randy Hastings, Chahal Nohua, and he was the lineage holder of the feathered serpent tradition of Mexico, and also the lineage holder of the jaguar tradition of Mexico. The feathered serpent tradition is like the mystical tradition. The jaguar tradition is like the sorcery, is like the healing and the sorcery tradition of Mexico. So he held those two lineages, and we became quick friends, and we trained each other in that. One of the things that I discovered there is, so this feathered serpent idea, which we call Quetzalcoatl in Mexico, aligns with the understanding of Katari in the southern part of Peru. Both are feathered serpents, and both teach you the path of becoming a feathered serpent. And there is a relation between these two medicine ways. And so that informs me to some degree as well, the things that I learned off of him, because this is a tradition of cross-cultural shamanism. Why is it a traditional cross-cultural shamanism? Because otherwise it couldn't be taught here. It couldn't be taught to anyone outside of the culture otherwise. And what I mean by that is they wouldn't understand it. If you worked with my teachers don't pontificate. They don't stand up in the middle of the room and pontificate about about how the things you're learning relates to this metaphysical idea, or to this idea in positive psychology, or to any of that, because they don't know that metaphysical idea. They don't know positive psychology. They're little humble people, and they don't do it that way. It's not about knowledge in the sense of knowing facts and truths and a long litany of things. They say, do what I do. They say, did you see what I did? Do that. Do that. Do what I did. No, you're doing it wrong. Do what I did. Well, how do I do what you did? Do as I did. Well, how do I want to do? It just is this way.
And you get it when you get it.
Yeah, and that is a lot of the teachings. Now, in our form of cross-cultural shamanism, what happens is, because I was raised in America, in North America, because I have that as my lineage, as my understanding. I had that when I went there. The thing is that I didn't act or understand the way a lot of Westerners act or understand. And that's probably one of the reasons why I was called to this tradition, or I had a thirst for it, because I wasn't looking for some metaphysical treaty. I wasn't looking for a whole lot of highfalutin words to understand something this simple. I was looking for the simplest path to direct knowledge. Direct knowledge has nothing to do with knowing anything. It has to do with being. It has to do with being able to do something. So, I think that's one of the reasons why I understood this tradition, and why I did become a chakaruna, a bridge person between cultures, is because I had that view of reality that was not that different than their view of reality. My father was a Baptist missionary preacher. My mother was like a gifted psychic. so I was given, and we lived in a time and a place in Appalachia where mountain magic was still alive, where it was part of your everyday life, whether you wanted to believe it or not. Everyone had gut instincts all the time. Well, that just don't feel right to me. You'd hear that all the time. I'm not feeling it. I'm just not feeling it. It feels icky to me. Oh, it feels sticky to me. Or I had a vision last night. These are conversations you'd hear everyone talking about. And sometimes even when they were deciding if they were going to go into work or something, it would be, well, I had this vision. I don't think I'm going today. It just doesn't feel right. I'm not going in. Something's off. I can't be there right now. So we had a very mystical and magical atmosphere that I grew up in. And I think that, along with, I was neurodivergent, and I'm not using that in the idea of the modern day idea of it, of being autistic or on the spectrum of autism or anything like that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about I was rebellious against what was indoctrination and sitting down. I didn't want to be in school, and I refused to do what the teachers wanted me to do. I refused to be a cooperative part of that system. I was a very wild child, and I just didn't want to be tamed. So, that's what I mean by that term. I wasn't.
It's hard to envision such a Zane. It's
yeah. So that was how I was, and I think that all lent itself very well to me. When I was growing up, there was our communities had a real distrust of education. We had a real distrust. Basically, what the community would say, for the most part, until I was closer to my high school years, was basically, you don't need that schooling. You don't need to be there. You're there because if you don't go, your parents are going to go to jail for neglect, and you're going to be taken away from them. But the community itself did not see much value in education in that form. And why is that? Because we were a community where you learned more being at home. You learned more about life from being at home than the facts they were telling you in school, which was just to learn to regurgitate information the way you received it, especially in primary school. So there was a real distrust of education. My mother, I think she had an 5th grade education. My father was college educated, of course, but so there was this real idea that what they did to you wasn't so great. And that is, of course, poverty mentality as well. When it's hard to achieve certain things because of where you're from and how little you have, it's hard for you to value the things that culture is trying to put value into. Not that I'm saying there's no value to education. I no longer believe that like I once did. Those are most of the traditions like that. I am also a Sancista, a Spiritista Brujo, which is initiated priest of an Afro-Caribbean tradition. And that's a very big part of my life too. And I, before any of this, I was a hoodooist, because root work is very close to Appalachia. That's where it comes from. It's through that whole region. Of course, we didn't call it hoodoo very often, but you just call it old magic or family magic, or you might just call it wisdom. So it was passed down. It's just, sometimes we called it root doctrine. But, that was something that I was before all of this as well. I was a hoodoo practitioner, So all of that kind of influences it. Also, work of a northern elder named Wolf Moondance kind of colors some of my teachings as well, because I worked with that, and a little bit of Rolling Thunder's work, which was someone who was big in the 60s and has been defamed in so many ways since then. But his power, regardless of how you try to defame someone, the things that they have done live on, whether you want to believe them anymore or not. There was a reason he was called Rolling Thunder, and that's because when he would do his work, you would hear rolling thunder in the clouds. You would actually hear that was something that was produced when he would go to working. So, and he was a Cherokee medicine man. The Cherokee don't claim him. And there's a very big reason about that. And that is he wasn't reservation born. He's not completely Cherokee. He wasn't reservation born. He learned off his grandmother, who wasn't reservation born, and that had learned their family traditions. And and now, especially in North America, it's about preserving these indigenous cultures that lived here. And, so a lot of people who still have indigenous knowledge are defamed because they just weren't born on the reservation. They was passed down in their family because their great-great-great-grandmother was a healer, or their great-great-grandmother was some type of wise person. And that information gets passed down, even if it doesn't get passed down with the original traditional words and the language. It still gets passed down in the way that the parents teach their children to understand reality around them.
Very good. I just had a cough there. Magic Mike was just saying hello, and he said put the link in the description. I did put it there for the apprenticeship I assume you're referring to, and I did have it there, and I also put it in comments, so you can see in the comments, if you look, we do have a link to the apprenticeship that's starting in just a month or two, which is very exciting. And as you were talking, one question that I had, when I remember you talking about Katari in the past, just to kind of loop back to the beginning of our conversation, there was this idea of, it was the serpent with the feet of a puma and the wings of a hummingbird and the antlers of an ant. Could you speak a little bit about that, especially the ant part? Because I'm wondering where that came from, if it's something you can speak about.
Sure. Okay, so it's so the serpent is just a second.
Yeah. And of course, everybody watching, if you have questions, please comment them. We're happy to go into any direction you'd like if you have a question.
So the serpent is the origin of our people. We come from that. And that's the base knowledge and understanding of the earth. And we love her. We love our mother. She gives us a place to live. She gives us all these experiences that make us wiser, that help us to grow something beautiful that transforms all of reality. Every one of you transforms all of reality. It's not just a few. It's not just a selected few. And she gives us that ability to have those experiences, to grow in that way. As we grow in that way, and we start to understand the way of our ancestors, the way of our past, and we start to be proud of those ways and not just see them as superstitious lore, we start to share that with others, and we start to grow. And as we're sharing that with others, it's like we're heading up to the mountain peaks of the earth, because she's our great mother. She gave birth to all of us. She's the original serpent. She's the first mover. She's the serpent that all life comes from. And as we move to her, on top of our mountain, we're on the spine of her and all that she's given us, and we hold it so dearly, and we say, we love you so much, Mother. We're so proud of this information. It's not like the information someone else has, and we're so proud of their information. We're so proud of the many different ways of spirit, the many different ways of humanity, that we each have patterns, that we each have cultures, and they're different, and we love that. And we're so proud of ours and everyone else's, that I'm going to climb to the top of the mountain. I'm going to climb up on her back, and I'm going to plant my flag. And my flag is a unique colored flag like no one else's, because I am a unique blending of the biology, of the ecology. I'm a unique blending of all of these things that has come together, and it creates one unique color. And I take that flag up, and it's a feather, and I put it in her back to show how beautiful she is. She gave me this feather, and now I'm going to elevate it, and I'm going to say it's such a gorgeous thing, and I'm going to take it to the top of the mountain. I'm going to take it there, and I'm going to plant it, and it's going to grow. And my neighbor's going to do the same thing, and all of our neighbors start to do the same thing. And as we go there and we're celebrating each other's differences, and we're sitting there planting these feathers into the spine of Mother Earth, the great serpent, she starts to get these rainbow colored wings, and they look like the wings of hummingbird. They look like the incandescent wings of hummingbird. And as we're communicating with each other, and as we're sharing our love with each other, and we're going to each other's communities, and we're working with each other in the way that the others work, and we're saying they're absolutely right, and they're saying we're absolutely right, and we're not trying to relate away anything at all. We're not trying to say, oh, this and this put together and it's this, No, we're just sharing perfectly from each other. And we're just sharing time with each other. We're breaking bread with each other. We're sharing customs and ways with each other. And that communitarian action brings us all together, because we realize we all came from the same source then. And that we're supposed to be different. We're not all supposed to be the same. And as we realize that we came from those different, that same source, and we're all so beautiful, and we're all growing in such unique ways, we start to share all this information, and it's like the rustling of the feathers, and the wings start to expand, and they become like the great wings of Condor, Eagle, Kuntar, and Ankas. And these wings have power now to them. They have a lot of power, but now we have to go back to the earth. We have to go back down. We've shared so much. We've grown our personal power, and our personal power is like the feet of Puma, because Puma is the power, right? Pa is the grau of the Puma, and the Puma is the power, and we're starting to walk now. We're walking stronger. We're walking taller. We're walking our talk. We're walking our beliefs. And as we start to do that, we start to develop the power of the Puma to walk in this reality, to see what's in this reality. And Puma doesn't just look. Puma rips apart. Puma destroys. Puma kills. Puma rebuilds. It's the life and death principle. And Puma goes out there, and Puma says, these things are good for me, not for everyone in the world. And these things are bad for me. And we start to say, it's okay for me, even though I can totally accept everyone else's way of doing things. And when I'm with them, I'm going to do it their way. But when I'm on my own, I've got to be true to myself. I've got to walk my walk, talk my talk. I've got to be me. I've got to be strong in that. And we become a Puma. We become the jaguar priest. And the jaguar priest can rip an illness from you, or can wrap you up in a brand new future. And then as we continue developing that power, eventually we are able to start to understand where we're going. Because where we're going is where we've already been. The future is the past. The future is what happened before. And we are going to do it again after. And now that we understand the cyclical nature of time itself and of reality itself, we start to grow those great antlers. The antlers are the antenna of ants, and ants always know where to go. Ants always know where the food is. Ants always know where everyone else has been, because their senses are primed to that. Their instinct has been renewed within them. And at that point, Mother Earth now, having those attributes, just like her children, having the attributes of the Puma, having the attributes of the hummingbird, having the attributes of ants, and now having all of that, she spreads her great wings of condor and eagle, and she is able to fly us to a new destination in space-time, a new place where things are different, a new place where there's new stars. And it's not the first time she's done it. It's happened over and over again. We have changed where we are in space. Sometimes we call it the succession of equinoxes. All these different times where the stars had changed, where they don't align where they used to align. Why is that? Because we're not in the same place anymore. We have flown. She's changed her orbit because we were ready for a new orbit of life. We were ready for a new dimension of life. And in another way, in a whole other way to see this is that we are the hummingbirds. We are sending all these satellites out into space. All these different types of crafts go out into space, and some of them are going into deeper and deeper space. And we cannot make anything in a hermetically sealed container. So every one of those spaceships, every one of them have microbes from the earth, have the building blocks of life itself. And that means that Earth is spreading her wings in that way as well, and is pollinating the dead worlds of our solar system. It might take eons for them to start to react, for those microbes to transform and change into a way to produce brand new life on those planets. But that's what we're doing. We're in the life-giving business. We are giving life to the dead universe. We are awakening the shells of the dead. I cannot hear you, Hank.
Yes, I coughed before and I forgot to unmute it. I just said thank you, and that was amazing. To whoever and whatever brought that through, including you. A Nike Kawaii. If you have questions or comments, we have Judy saying that was so freaking amazing. So she also concurs. And I see quite a few people having joined us. I'm so glad that you took that moment to grab your mesa and to shift the energy for that to be received. A Nike Kawaii.
It was the question. Yeah. It required an answer that I can't give.
Well, I'm glad I asked a question then. And, that is just one example of how in this tradition, whether you come to the program or just come to one of Zane's events or a retreat or come onto the next live stream and ask a question where you're willing to ask a question, and the willingness not just to ask the question but to receive, like you're ready to receive that answer. This is an exact example of what can happen. Mary Lee asks, can't share. I'm not sure what you mean with that. And I believe you can absolutely share this stream with whomever you like. This is a public stream. You can share it wherever you like to share it. And yeah. Does anyone have questions, comments, anything else to go along with where we went with this conversation, which was totally unexpected? Thank you. Yeah. And while we wait to see if anybody types anything else, I already put the link in the description, and I fixed, there had been an error with you don't see the share button. I don't know what to tell you, Mary Lee. I don't know. I will send you a link, Mary Lee, that after this, you can just post a link and you can share this. So you can do that way. I'm not sure about the share button. That's beyond the scope of what I can help with, but I can get you a link after the broadcast here, and you can share that. Absolutely. And that's really a thing to remember is, if you're looking to how you can do your part to change the world, it really is, who can you be in this moment? What are you inspired to share in this moment? And when we all start to share without expectation of how it will be received or anything like that, just because we feel that inspiration to share, that's where the world really starts to change, because we always kind of tend to look at what we can't do instead of what we can do. And we all do have, like Sam was talking about, that gut instinct in that root work. We all have those gut instincts and those gut inspirations, but oftentimes we talk ourselves out of sharing it because our head, like, oh, I don't know if people are going to want to hear this.
Absolutely.
I don't, but if you really start to just feel that inspiration and you just know that you don't know why, but this is what I'm supposed to say, and this is when I'm supposed to say it, and you share that, like that willingness is what really starts to change the world. And Judy did have a question, though. She's saying that maybe there isn't time, but we can all, if Zane doesn't have any place to go, we can make time. But can you talk about the different serpents of the tradition?
Oh, well, yeah, there's all kinds of serpents within the tradition itself. How they go into that. So the serpent is the rain bringer. because lightning is a serpent. Seeing strikes of lightning, and there's male and female lightning that we work with, and understanding how weather is produced is all serpent. I don't know. There's so much to that particular question.
One thing we could do if we want to make that a whole separate stream one time at the Serpents of the Tradition, when we can have you on, we could also dedicate a little bit more time and space to a more thorough.
Yeah, we could definitely do that, because there's the vipers, and then there's also the other serpents. Most of the time when we're talking about the serpents of this tradition, the two that people are the most familiar with are Sachamama and Yakumama. And that basically means the earth serpent, the water serpent. And they're both like, the indigenous people say they're two different serpents, but science and some science that has been going into some biology that's been done on some DNA samples say that the Yakumama, biologically, the biological thing that they call the Yakumama is a rare breed of the anaconda that has different types of markings. But of course, that is more of a modern thing that we're talking about there, where there is the more metaphysical quality of those two serpents, and they represent space-time. Sachamama is all materialism, is all of the living material universe. She eats that and produces it out of eating it. And Yakumama is like always mentioned as like when you drop a pebble into a pond and you see the ripples move out. So within the more invisible side of material creation is the influence of Yakumama, which is like the curvature and the wave of space-time moving through, or of space. So space and time coming together, these two serpents, they interweave up what we call the Kepaknan, which is that diagonal angle within the Andean cross, the Chicana. And that is to say that the interweaving of these two serpents, which would be their mating dance, creates all material creation. So we would see that those two serpents as two aspects of the energy or the emanation of Pachamama. Two of her energies is Yakumama and Sachumama, and they are in a type of mating intertwining that creates a churning within a static universe, and that churning allows for life to emerge.
Cool. That's a good question. And you mentioned what is the Andean cross? The word I always mispronounce it. Chicana. There's one place that just is coming to mind, just to mention, and maybe you could elaborate on it. There's a place on one of the mountains where there's that symbol, but it's only half the symbol.
Well, it's always like that. It's almost always like that.
Yeah, but when the sun hits it at a certain time of day, the shadow creates the other half. And I just think that just popped in my head, and I thought that was really cool because it's kind of like two halves of an interdimensional type of thing going on.
Well, I didn't mean that there's never a temple that has a whole Chicana on it. But as you're walking around those places in Peru, you'll find just the top. You'll find just the bottom. You'll find just the right side. You'll find just the left side or you'll find the top and the left, or the top and the right, the bottom and the left, the bottom and the right. And what that is to do is to describe to you what is the energy movement of that place. Because these temples were not just built, this is a pretty place to build a temple. They were built along energy lines, and they were built in nodes within energy lines. So there would be places where we might say they're places where the ley lines cross. But there's always another element to that, and it's that there is a place where natural forming ley lines or seke lines cross, but also an artificial seke line of humanity crosses. So when and that happens when our attention is brought to what's going on there. So what these people did in their wisdom was they wanted to tell you how to use that particular place. And so you might be at one fountain and it might have the downward pointing part of the Andean cross on it. So that's telling you that in that area is a downward flow of energy. And that if you go there, that you naturally can go into a downward flow of energy without any intention, without any practice, without any work. This will happen here because everything that enters here enters into a downward flow of energy. Or it shows the right side, and it's telling you that that is a place of mystical illumination, a place where you would go to do the right hand work. Or it shows left side, so that would be a place where you would go to improve yourself in some way, to make changes in your life using the energy that's present at that site. So that is one of the understandings of why these chakanas are not produced all the way. It wasn't that they got lazy suddenly halfway through carving it and decided, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm not going to carve this here. It was that it was a sign to tell you how to use the spiritual energy of that particular site. And one temple could have several of these in it, or one whole temple could just have one.
Sorry, I'm just messaging you a private note, actually. Haha. Since I can do that. Thank you. That is always that is. I never considered that. I always thought it was more of an abstract meaning, like with the shadow, and it's like completing it and all that. I didn't realize that they had like a little bit of directional meaning of how to use specific sacred sites. That's really
well. That's one thing that we have to remember about the culture there. They're not so abstract. They're practical. That's what's so beautiful about the tradition, is that it's practical. Teaching this tradition is a way to improve your life. Doesn't mean you'll be rich. Doesn't mean that you will feel fulfilled all the time. But just the practices of this tradition lead you to a place where you can enjoy your life more, where you can enjoy whatever your life is. We get so bogged down, especially in personal development and spirituality anymore. It's really become like this thing of, oh, how do I become rich? How do I get accolades? How do I get all of this? And that wasn't so important to those people. So it's not going to be important within their tradition. What's important within their tradition is developing the qualities and character of leadership, of being able to lead people. And leading people is a cooperative thing. It's not taking control of people. People have to want to be led. You don't lead the people who don't want to be led by you. That's sacrilege. You don't try to convince them to let you lead them. No, you leave them for someone else because they don't want to be led by you. But for people who want to be led, and every human has to be led. For people who want to be led, to want to learn more, to develop the qualities that allows you to be a good leader, that allows you to teach in a good way, so that the student learns from their own experience, not from what you're teaching them. But they need you to present it to them in a way that they can then make it their own. And they can develop that something inside of themselves. They can irrigate their seed of potential. And then what pops out of that potential sometimes is surprising. Oftentimes, it's nothing that the person ever thought they wanted to develop or be. In fact, many Pacos say no to this path. That's another thing that we don't always understand in the West. Most people, when they're chosen for this path, say no. They don't want it. They don't want the responsibility. They don't want to carry other people, because it really is carrying. And some people might not get that completely, but when you step up to teach, you're carrying people. That means that no matter how detached you are from their hucha and everything that's going on in their life, That means even things you don't know about will affect your energy field. Is supposed to affect your energy field because you are carrying them. You are lifting them up, and you are carrying them to help them realize something, to help them develop something that only happens truly with inside of themselves. You're just holding that for them. And holding that is hard work. I don't care if it's just a box of candles. If you're carrying a box of candles to a sanctuary that's 7 days away, after a while, that box of candles gets really, really heavy, and it could injure you. But you got to carry it there because you promised the people that you would deliver it, their prayers, to the sanctuary. You promised that, you carry it. That's your responsibility.
Now, I'm going to ask this question generally because we had a question from an alumni that I'm going to pose in this way so it's a bit more applicable to everyone. If you're called to a path, whether it's this path or another path, and life happens and kind of you feel like you've kind of lost it or whatnot, is it possible that you start a path like this and then you're no longer on the path, or how do you get back on? Like, what's a Paco, always a Paco? It kind of fits in with what you were just talking about. Some Pacos say no to that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, absolutely. If you being a Paco means practicing the tradition, which is taught to you. You're taught how to practice the tradition. You one day decide, I'm not practicing the tradition anymore. Well, okay, you're not practicing it. 20 years go by and you pick the tradition back up. You are still a Paco. You're still a Paco. It's just for a while you went into retirement. For a while, you decided it wasn't for you anymore. For a while, you weren't able to do it. My first teacher, Juan, when his teacher died, he didn't get the message that he was dying, and his teacher arranged a big ceremony. And in that ceremony, he handed down pieces of his mesa to his students, along with the final teachings that he had to give them. And my teacher missed that. And he missed it, and it really hurt him. And then he found out that he had died. He found out that he hadn't received his final teachings from his master and all of that. And he picked up his Misha, and he flung it against the wall as hard as he could, screaming, I'll never practice again. And he didn't practice for a good long while. And then one day he picked up his Misha, and he started to practice again. Because this is a spiritual art. Once you learn to draw, you're always a sketch artist. You might have gone 20 years without drawing anything, and you might not be able to do it as effortlessly as you could back then, but you still have the potential within you to sketch a portrait. It just takes a little practice. You just get back into it. You just pick up where you left off and you go forward with it. This tradition is not one that says, oh, you've got to be there with your teacher forever. You got to work forever with them. And you have all these things that you must do and you must do on a regular basis. Sure, we have all kinds of things we do. Some of the people in the master circle are just realizing now that we do a full moon despacho every full moon. That it's not that you have to, but it's a good thing to do because it helps you communicate with the spirits, because that's the real relationship here. The real relationship is between you and the spirits of the tradition. Now, those spirits, to some degree, are password protected, like we were saying at the beginning, meaning that there has to be certain things done to totally awaken you to that path, to totally give you that permission into that tradition. Doesn't mean that, and there are all kinds of Pacos who don't really have teachers in South America whose teacher is the mountain. And they go to the mountain and they'll sit with the mountain and they'll make all kinds of despachos for the mountain and they'll communicate with it, and they learn some things and they learn powerful things from the nature spirit. But there is still password protected areas that you only get once you receive certain initiations into any tradition. And that's the way it's supposed to be. There's certain mysteries of Shiva, certain mysteries of Krishna that you don't get unless you initiate and take on the yoke. That's what it's called, a yoke, a yoga. What is it? It's a yoke. It's the same thing you put like a bridle, or like the collar that you put around a bull to get a bull to pull your cart. That's a yoke. And that's what a yoga is you're picking up a tie to that tradition. And you have to do it in a certain way to receive the information of that tradition to that degree. Anyone can go and serve Mount Ansangante, but Pacos do it in their way. And once you're a Paco, you're always a Paco.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So last call, we are already over an hour. So like 2 minutes. If you have a final question, final comment, you can put it down now, and then we will wrap up. I think Magic Mike, when he heard you say, will you do a despacho over phone, he's like, what?
Well, no, not you, Magic Mike. I'm the people in the master circle who are ready to take on that yoke, that extra yoke, and understand, what's actually going on there. That are willfully graduating to that next place within that tradition. They have that responsibility. It's tiered. It's not, I don't like to say hierarchical, but it's tiered. And as you learn more information, there's more responsibility that falls on your lap. At a certain point, if you're really trying to teach people something, your responsibility becomes to teach that the best that you can. There's a lot of people who have been introduced to this tradition, and that this tradition has made a change in their life, and they do a lot of work, and they work for other people and stuff. And they're not required to do all of that because they haven't stepped up to that level. They haven't decided, this is what I want to do. And it's a labor of love. It doesn't guarantee you success or anything else. Like I said, in many of my first retreats, I paid to teach. Meaning I might have had 15 to 20 people coming to learn something from me, but it took pretty much all the money that I charged and more to rent the place that I was teaching at.
Mm-hmm.
So I was actually paying to have the privilege to teach those people who were coming to me to learn. And that happened many times.
Yep.
It's a labor of love.
Yep. It's to be a service. And
yeah, it's not a career path. Though, as I tell all my students, sometimes it resembles one. But don't make it the only way you can take care of yourself.
Yeah, I had a knowing around something around that. It's like if you make that passion and that service like all that you have in terms of livelihood or whatnot, sometimes your service can become servitude, or you feel like your passion can become a prison even, because now in order to pay the rent, you got to do X amount of healings, and then it just kind of makes a shift. It has the potential to make a shift.
It has a potential to change the way that you go into it, and it has the potential to start to wreck the Ini that you have developed to that point, which is divine reciprocity. Ini is something very beautiful, and in this tradition, we're trying to stay in it. And Ini is something of the middle world and the upper world, we say. And the upper world is perfect Ini. Everything is always Ini. Everything is always giving and receiving in extra measure, not in equal measure, in extra measure at all times. This world, we get to choose about Ini. But the lower world, there's another quality, and it's called Chaya. And Chaya is mercantile exchange. And it's a whole different form of energy. Ini is a continuous flow of energy like this. It moves and it moves and it moves. But Chaya is you come to me, and maybe I have something like this, and you say, oh, I really want that. I've always wanted one of those. And I say, okay, there's no energy moving right now, right? I say, okay, it's mine. It's locked into mine. You don't get it yet. I say, it'll be $150. You say, okay, I have $150. The moment you give me that $150 and I hand you this, there is a moment of energy exchange. Ini is not like that. Ini is a continuous energy exchange. It continuously renews itself and refreshes itself. Chaiwa is the mercantile exchange, putting a price on something and saying no flow happens until this price is paid. When this price is paid, there's a short burst of a flow, and that's it. Then you go on your way, I go on my way, and I'll make another chaiwa over here and another over here with the money that I got. Sometimes people say the Aini exchange has to be proper. Well, a proper Aini exchange doesn't have to have any money involved in it. Of course, we have to survive, so we have to charge money for our services, and that's absolutely nothing new. It's been going on the entire time, this tradition. This tradition, I'm not saying all indigenous healing traditions do this, but in this tradition, if you wanted to be initiated, it cost a lot. If you wanted to have a healing done for you, it cost a lot. And if you didn't make that price, it wasn't done for you. That was just how it was. But in our tradition, we're trying to master Aini, the continuous flow of energy. That doesn't mean that we're going to never do chaiwa. We're going to, but we have to master Aini. And if we make our spiritual work about survival, then we are not acting from Aini anymore. If what we do is worry and fret about it, it should be, at best, most of the time, a secondary source of income, because I believe that keeps you, there's no rule here, but I believe that keeps you in the proper state of mind so that the flow of Aini can happen within your ceremonies, can happen within your work, so that you don't, even if it's not something that you feel influences you, but you know that at the end of the day, you have to pay a bill and you were just waiting for this to be able to pay that bill, you're still putting that weight on it. And what that can end up doing is causing a disconnect between your physical self and your spiritual self, where your physical self no longer trusts your spiritual self. Or as we say oftentimes in the training, your me no longer trusts your I. And when that happens, you can no longer function in your soul path. It doesn't mean that you no longer have the position. It doesn't mean you're no longer doing the work. It means that suddenly you're not working it as a soul path anymore. You're working it as a life path, as a career path. And all those things are beautiful. And if it opens up to you where you can achieve it that way, that's a gorgeous thing. It happens for some people. I'll tell you a little secret. It happens and then it doesn't. And that doesn't mean that you lost favor with God. It only means you had a particular period of time when there were a lot of people who needed you, and you did a good job, and they don't need you anymore. They don't need that anymore from you. So now you don't have that group anymore, and you wait for the next group to develop and to find you again. And all the marketing tricks in the world don't change that. All they do is, I believe, eat at your soul, because you're sitting there going, why am I not getting more? Why am I not getting more? Why is this not moving better for me? And then you get into the ideas of prosperity, spirituality. Oh, if I was on the right path, things would be easier. Oh, if I was doing good work, things would be easier. No, maybe you just touched all the people you were supposed to touch at this moment. Maybe it's someone else's turn for a while. And you don't get to control that, because that's part of their growth.
Very good. Well, I think we covered a lot of ground today. Thank you so much for coming on. And thank you, everybody, for your questions and everything. And whenever Zane's available, we'll try to have him on, especially on a day like today when Melissa had store stuff to do. So unexpected bonus to have Zane on a Thursday. Nike Kawaii. All right. Till next time, everyone. Take care.